In this video, we will talk about some important logical functions. We will first discuss logical test on single argument, that is, if one particular condition is true or false. In this case, we have this student table. We have students, 5 students, and their marks in maths, science, and English. And for our first case, we want to identify if any student have scored 100 in maths or not. So if they have scored 100, it will return true, and if they have not scored 100, it will return false. Now let's write the logical test is equals to, now I will give the cell reference, and then is equals to 100. Let's press enter. So it is false as it is not 100. If I change it to 100, it changed to be true. Now let's fill this formula. So as you can see, all of them are false except this. So if I change this one as well, let's use 100, it's true. So this is how you can use single logical test. Now similarly, if you want to apply this condition on all the subjects, you can use AND with the logical test. For example, let's use is equals to and then we can provide 3 different conditions, that if this is equals to 100 or greater than 75, comma, if this is greater than 75, comma, and if this is greater than 75. So these are 3 conditions combined in an AND. Now let's press enter. So as you can see, it is false. Now let's fill this. So as you can see, only student 4 has scored 75 or more than 75 in all 3 subjects. If I change, let's say this one to say 76, and this also is less than 75, let's change it as well, let's say 78. So it changed to be true. Now moving forward, we can also use OR logic with this logical test. So if I want to check if any of the student has scored less than 35 in any subject, then I can use OR. Let's write the formula is equals to OR. So the cell reference, this is less than 35, or this less than 35, or this less than 35. Let's press enter. So it is false, none of them are less than 35. So let's fill it. Now it is false for every subject. So if I change one, let's say this as 34, it says true. This is how you can use this logical test. Now let's move to the next function. The next formula we'll talk about is if. The formula use the outcome of logical test which we have seen earlier, and then it give predefined output for true and false. Suppose if you want to assign grades to student based on math score, where student with equal or greater than 75 has scored A, otherwise they have scored the grade B. So if the score is greater than 75, the grade is A, and if the score is less than 75, the grade is B. Let's write this. So if I use equal to and use if, and then use the logical test. So it says we have to write the logical expression first, then we have to write the value if true, and then the value if false. So let's write it. So the logical expression is for this cell have to be greater than equal to 75. Then the value if true is A, and the value if false is B. Now let's press enter. So the grade is A, and if I fill this using the autofill suggestion, the student 3 has grade B and student 5 has grade B. So as you can see, they have scored less than 75 in math, and this student 3 has scored less than 75 in math as well. Now moving forward, for multiple logical tests in sequential format, we can use nested ifs, which means if inside an if. For example, we want to give grade A for student who have scored greater than 85 or equal to 85. Then we want to give B for the student who have scored in between 85 and 60. And then we want to give grade C for student who have scored less than 60. So let's use it. So if I use equal to, and then if I use if, I have to provide the logical test first. So the logical test will be that the marks should be greater than equal to 85. Then the expression if true is A, and the expression if false is another if. So I will use if, and then I have to provide the logical expression that this score must be less than 60. And if that is true, then the grade is C, and then if it is false, the grade is B. So now let's enter. So the grade is B. So as you can see, the score is less than 85, but it is greater than 60. Similarly, if I autofill it, only student 4 has grade A as his score is equal to 85, and only student 5 has grade C as his score is less than 60. This is how you can use nested ifs. So you can use multiple ifs inside ifs. We can also use logical operators like AND and OR inside ifs. Suppose we want to apply a condition, that is, if marks are greater than 75, then the student has passed the exam with distinction. And if the score is not greater than 75, then the student is failed, or we don't want an output, we can leave it as well. So if I write this query is equals to if, and if I use AND, then I can provide multiple conditions, that if score in math is greater than 75, then score in science is greater than 75, then score in English is greater than 75, greater than 75. So the AND is complete. Then I can use the condition. So if the logical operator is true, then pass with distinction. So pass with distinction. And then if it is false, either I can use fail or not pass with distinction, or I can leave it as well. So if I press enter, it says pass with distinction. If I write it, so the person has not passed with distinction, the output is false. The person has passed with distinction, the output is passed with distinction. So if I change it to the student has not passed with distinction and then press enter, so he's not passed with distinction. And if I fill it, as you can see, passed, not passed, passed, not passed. Moving forward, we can also use or with if. So if I use for this condition, so if the student has scored less than 35, then the student is failed. And if he has scored greater than 75, then he is promoted. So if I use the query is equals to if and then use or, then I can use maths less than 35, or so it is less than 35, or science less than 35, or English less than 35. Then I can use if it is true, then the student has failed, so fail, and if it is false, then the student is promoted. If I press enter, so promoted, 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 and failed. So only student 5 is failed, as he has scored 34 in science. That is the reason he has failed, because he has failed in only one exam, but still the outcome returns fail. So this is how you can use if, and we can also use logical operators with if and nested if as well. Moving to the next function. Now let's move to the COUNTIF function. So COUNTIF function returns count of cells which satisfy a given criteria. Here we want to identify the number of students who have scored grade A, B or C. So if I use COUNTIF here, if I use COUNTIF, so I can count how many students have scored grade A, how many students have scored grade B, and how many students have scored grade C. So if I use COUNTIF, so first I have to provide the range. So if I use this range, so E4 to E8, and then I have to provide the criteria, which is the grade has to be A. And we also know that we have to use the absolute cell reference. So if I use $ here and here, and if I press enter, so we have 3 A's, 2 B's and 0 C's. Now similarly, if I use this formula for science, if I use COUNTIF and then I provide range and then I provide the criteria that the grade has to be A, and if I change it with absolute reference, so $, and if I press enter, so we have only 1 A, 3 B's and 1 C's. Similarly, I can use it for English as well. COUNTIF range with $, so G4 to G8, then the condition, it has to be A, enter. So we have only 1 A, 4 B and 0 C's. So this is how you can use COUNTIF. And if you want to use multiple checks, you can use COUNTIFs. So you have to provide multiple conditions and it will count according to them. So suppose you have a condition that you want to check if the student has passed with distinction. So if you want to count how many students have passed with distinction, you can use the criteria greater than 75 and use COUNTIFs. So if I write COUNTIFs, so it says count value depending on multiple criteria. So the first criteria is that if maths and the condition or the criteria is greater than 75, then the next is the criteria range, then the criteria greater than 75, the next criteria range, then the criteria greater than 75, and let's press enter. So there is only one student who have scored 75 in all three. So as we can see, student 2 has scored greater than 75 in all of these. Student 1 has scored in only 2. If I change it to 76 and press enter, it will change to 2. So this is how you can use multiple conditions with COUNTIF. Now let's move to the next function. So the next function is SUMIF. SUMIF is similar to COUNTIF. The only difference is that it adds the cells which satisfy the criteria. For example, we want to identify the sum of marks of student in math who have not failed in the exam. So if the fail is false, then I want to add their marks. So let's write this. So if I use SUMIF, then I have to provide the range. So this is my criteria range. I have to use absolute cell reference as well. So I can use $. Then I have to provide the criteria, that is it has to be false. Then I have to provide the sum range. So this is the sum range. Let's use absolute reference as well. And if I press enter, the sum is 333. As the student 1 has passed, student 2 has passed, student 3 has passed, so only student 5 has failed, and that is the reason we have only counted these 4. So if you count them, 200, 70 and 50, so it will sum up to 333. Similarly, we can write it for science as well. So if I use SUMIF, then I can provide this range Then I can provide the criteria. It has to be false. Then the marks. So 322. And similarly, if I write it here as well, let's use SUMIF, the range, the criteria, and the marks. So maths has 308. This is how you can use SUMIF function. Now we will move to the next topic. Thank you.